Fox News alert, things are only getting worse down on Wall Street. Look at the Dow, down 473 points right now, almost 2% on the day. That takes us back under the numbers of the first of the year. So the Dow down about 3.7% for the year. And at this moment, it is lower than it was on January 1. The other indexes, the NASDAQ, the S&P, the Dow Jones Transports, also down as well. Let's hope we turn that around, okay?
Absolutely. People are watching that. John, it's been great to see you today.
Good to have you here, Molly.
Be back tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks for joining us.
Outnumbered starts right now.
Fox News alert on claims from the Kremlin that President Trump invited Russian President Vladimir Putin to a summit at the White House. Russia's state news agency is reporting the invitation was made during the March 20th phone call. It comes amid criticism that the president isn't being tough enough on Putin, and as special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian election meddling is still ongoing. This is Outnumbered. I'm Melissa Francis, here today, the host of Kennedy on Fox Business. Kennedy, anchor of the Intelligence Report, also on FBN Trish Regan, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth. And joining us on the couch today, veteran journalist and Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. He is the author of a new book, The Geraldo Show, a memoir. And he is outnumbered. I think we're outnumbered with just you here.
Oh, I appreciate that, Melissa. They say when you're a veteran, that's when you're old and lame and...
You are nothing of the sort.
Dragging your sword behind into the show.
Your book is so juicy. I thought you brought a peck of peaches to the set.
Well, I was going to say there are a peck of peaches here.
Careful.
See, that's because I'm old and lame. I can say things.
There you go. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's move on before we get in trouble. The Kremlin is claiming President Trump invited Vladimir Putin to a summit at the White House. That is according to Russia's state news agency. It is reporting that President Trump made the invitation when they spoke on the phone late last month, but no date for this meeting was discussed. This, of course, coming as special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian election meddling is ongoing. And after those tit-for-tat diplomatic expulsions following the poisoning of a former Russian spy and his daughter in the UK. In spite of those actions and other recent sanctions, President Trump has been criticized for not being tough enough on Putin. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox News Sunday.
I think the problem is that Russia's running wild. Whatever we're doing is not working, and the president, for some reason, has a hard time pushing back against Putin directly.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying in a statement, as the president himself confirmed on March 20th, hours after his last call with President Putin, the two had discussed a bilateral meeting in the not-too-distant future at a number of potential venues, including the White House. We have nothing further to add at this time. Geraldo, I'll go to you first. What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, Putin is a thug. He's a creep. He's a sore on the body of the world.
What do you really think?
I hope it's true. I hope it's true that the president has had the courage to invite Putin, despite all the pushback, all the Mueller stuff, the fact that he can't have Russian dressing on his salad now because of the collusion, illusion, and how Mueller has distorted U.S. foreign policy. As the president himself told me months ago, wouldn't the world be a better place if the United States and Russia had open, honest discussions and relations? I absolutely agree with the president. I hope this is true. I hope they have a meeting. It can't hurt.
Yeah. Lisa, can they have honest conversations, though? Open, honest conversation? I mean, that's the thing, is if you listen to, for example, Ambassador John Bolton, Russia's a bad actor. They're almost always lying. How do you deal with someone like that?
Well, Russia is a bad actor, and they are always lying. I think as long as the president is clear-eyed in what Putin is and who he represents and what he represents. But I think, you know, with the Russia thing, it depends on how you want to view it, right? If you want to just focus on, you know, the commentary, if you just want to focus on the tweets, then you have one narrative on Russia. If you want to focus on the actions, that's an entirely different narrative. And we're literally coming off of the heels of the biggest purge of Russian diplomats in the United States history, with President Trump and the Trump administration. Also recent sanctions. You can go through, look at lethal arms sales to Ukraine. I mean, there's a long list of actions the Trump administration has taken against Russia, whereas you go back to the Obama administration and he was weak. I mean, he was weak in his actions. He tried to be tough in his rhetoric, but everybody knew it was a joke. And I think President Trump is different in the sense of, you know, he may be a little weak on the rhetoric, but his actions are tough. And I think other leaders know that he's going to be tough in his actions and follow through on it.
Kennedy?
It's interesting. I mean, I would like to see a little bit of consistency with the North Korea policy and the Russian policy, because I think we can all agree so far the North Korean policy has been working. And that is, the president has been more verbally aggressive. He has been very unpredictable. And I think he needs to do the same thing with Russia. I would like to see more unpredictability and less of a conciliatory tone with Moscow. If you watch the documentary Icarus, which is about the state-sponsored doping system that was in place for decades in Russia, you see how, as a country, as a government, they want to win at all costs.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could take doping as a metaphor for what's happening with their foreign policy. They're doing the same thing. You know, they badmouth their enemies. They rationalize everything. And I don't want to see the president as seen as believing it. And so, therefore, I would like to see what's happening in North Korea applied to Russia. I think we would have better results. And by the way, Russia has acted like a child. They should be treated like a child.
Except for, Trish, I mean, they're different actors in the sense that North Korea seems almost irrational, where Russia, I mean, Vladimir Putin plays a very long and thoughtful game. So I don't know that the same approach would work. Your thoughts?
That's an interesting point, Melissa. I think it's not really going to get him anything, sitting down with Putin. I think it's a nice gesture. He should have these dialogues, but it's not as though it's going to change anything. But hey, you know, if he's going to sit down with Kim Jong-un, he might as well be sitting down with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is very smart, but so is our president. I don't think either one is going to feel the charm offensive in such a way that either is seduced by the other. So therefore, I don't know as it gets you anywhere.
Can I just add something to that very quickly? Because I think you're absolutely right. I think these photo ops, they do absolutely nothing. They don't achieve anything. But what we've seen, especially with the president and congressional leaders on Capitol Hill, both parties, when he has those open meetings, not only are they entertaining, you know, you can also hold someone's feet to the fire because you put something on record in public with transparency. Russia is allergic to transparency.
Good point.
How much would you love to see one of those meetings between Putin and Trump where it's not just the photo op, but the substantial, yes.
That would be very interesting. All right, another Fox News alert for you. President Trump tweeting again today about immigration, saying DACA is dead. He is blaming Democrats and calling on Congress to go nuclear if need be to get a border wall done. DACA is, of course, the Obama-era program that protects hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who came here as kids from deportation. The president decided to end it. That was effective on March 5th, but federal court rulings have allowed the program to remain in place while the legal battles play out. The president tweeting this morning, quote, DACA is dead because the Democrats didn't care to act. And now everyone wants to get onto the DACA bandwagon. No longer works. Must build wall and secure our borders with proper legislation. Democrats want no borders, hence drugs and crime. He's also referenced the caravan of people. Have you seen this? Most of them are from Honduras, who are reportedly heading through Mexico to our southern border seeking asylum. The president tweeting, Mexico has the absolute power not to let these large caravans of people enter their country. They must stop them at their northern border, which they can do because their border laws work, not allow them to pass through into our country, which has no effective border laws. Congress must immediately pass border legislation, use nuclear option if necessary, to stop the massive inflow of drugs and people. Border Patrol agents and ICE are great, but the weak Dem laws don't allow them to do their job. Act now, Congress, our country will be stolen. President Trump is also threatening to exit NAFTA if Mexico doesn't do something to help control the flow of people and drugs through the country. He shared some of his thoughts on the immigration issue yesterday before church.
Mexico has got to help us at the border. If they're not going to help us at the border, it's a very sad thing between two countries. Mexico has got to help us at the border. And a lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA. And we're going to have to really see. They had a great chance. The Democrats blew it. They had a great chance. But we'll have to take a look. But Mexico has got to help us at the border. They flow right through Mexico. They send them into the United States. Can't happen that way anymore. Thank you.
Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California reacting this morning to the president's tweets.
Give me a break. Give me a break. What is this guy doing? What did the president do? He promised during his campaign two things. One, he would terminate DACA. He did that. He created this crisis. He created this problem all by himself. We actually offered a pile of money for the border wall, and he turned it down.
There you go, Geraldo.
You know, I'm filled with sadness and melancholy with the whole scene of the 1,000 people from Honduras making their way through Mexico. Regardless of Mexico's blame or complicity, those 1,000 people are leaving a country that I have covered in Central America that is fraught with violence, with kidnappings, with the drug lords have supplanted the local government. It's a horrible, horrible situation. Jump cut to the reality. There are 7 billion people on the planet. They all want to live in the United States. I mean, virtually all of them. You have to have borders. You have to have some kind of immigration control. I totally get that. The Dreamers, though, and the wall, I think, should be considered as one issue. Why? Because I know there's a deal there. I know that the Democrats will go for $25 billion to build the southern border wall, and I know that the President of the United States was elected largely on that issue, and that issue will still be the paramount issue, I believe, in the midterm elections. Conversely, I also believe that the president has promised not 800,000, but 1.6 million Dreamers and an expanded class a path to citizenship. If you combine these two things, strip away everything else. I'll give you the $25 billion for the wall. You give me the Dreamers, and there is a conciliation. Compromise hurts both sides. Both sides feel that they have been imposed upon by a compromise. But if that wall hurts a lot of people. I say build the damn wall, get the $25 billion, give these kids some stability, give them some peace of mind. The president knows that the 1,000 people in the caravan and anyone coming after 2012 has no right to DACA. It's a non-issue. It was a factual, incorrect statement. But DACA, the wall, compromise, let's get this thing done.
Lisa, do you think that both sides would go for that deal if you stripped away everything else?
Well, I think President Trump laid out a deal, as you mentioned, that was a compromise. Both sides were mad at him over the proposal that he laid out, which then would show you that it's something down the middle. But to lay this at the president's feet, as that member of Congress did, is wrong. President Obama was the one that created a program that was not constitutional. His own attorneys at the Justice Department said they were concerned about it being constitutional or not. Also, Congress has been trying to get something done on Dreamers for something like 16 years now and has failed. There were 4 different proposals in the Senate that were voted down, meaning bipartisan proposals, Democrat proposals, Republican proposals that did not pass. So this is a much deeper issue, and to lay this at President Trump's feet is just wrong.
Yeah. What about ending chain migration, right? Or the lottery system? These were things that they got bogged down in the past. And, you know, Geraldo, I hear you. I think there is a deal there, but I think it's got to include some of these other measures in that you want to end chain migration, you want to end the lottery system, and you want to say, okay, from here on out, we're going to be aggressive about who we want in this country. We want you to prove that you are needed in this country before just coming on in.
If you broaden it, Trish, to beyond the very simple parameters I've laid out, chain migration, the lottery, visa lottery, and all that. I think you start to bog it down, and you get back to what Lisa was saying about, you know, we had this proposal, that proposal, this proposal.
Back and forth.
Just keep it simple. You can make a deal right now. Wall, DACA, future.
Kennedy, I mean, does everyone win or does everyone lose if we do that deal?
I don't think that everyone loses. I think that this is such an emotional issue. There has to be some level of compromise. And Geraldo's right in that you have to keep it simple if you're not going to keep it rational. Both sides are incapable of a rational discussion right now. Immigrants are not a class to be demonized and written off as a whole. The president is also trying to compromise here, unlike a traditional Republican, and Democrats have to reach out and meet that compromise. And both sides have to stop acting like they're so far apart, because if it is Dreamers for the wall, that is very simple. It's very straightforward.
It's very straightforward.
And I think Democrats would be foolish to turn that down. But now, unfortunately, it's so politicized and so emotionalized, it's only about the midterms. It's not about reaching an actual solution.
I agree with that, unfortunately.
All right, the U.S. kicking off joint military exercises with South Korea ahead of President Trump's possible meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. One four-star general says the president's maximum pressure campaign is driving diplomacy with the rogue nation. But others think Kim Jong-un may have something else in mind. And we are watching the Dow, look at that, taking quite a dip after China hitting back at President Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The potential impact the retaliation could have on our economy, whether a trade war is on, or if President Trump's moves will ultimately protect American workers. That's next. All right, we want to show you what's going on in Oklahoma City here. Tens of thousands of teachers from Kentucky and Oklahoma have walked out. You've seen similar protests going on in other cities in other states. They were inspired, of course, by the West Virginia teachers who went on strike and got a pay raise from their state leaders. Other states like Arizona have followed suit. So you can see here, pretty big walkout. We'll keep an eye on it for you.
You know, they go to college, they have college loans.
Yes.
And then they get paid, what, $25,000 a year. I mean, no wonder they have complaints.
Well, they get more than that.
A lot of teachers in some of these states get very little money for college-educated people.
All right, and we will continue that discussion on another day. Right now, the United States and South Korea kicking off their 4-week-long joint military exercises yesterday ahead of a planned face-to-face meeting between President Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. The North vowing not to protest the drills as part of its agreement to meet with President Trump. General Jack Keane praising the commander-in-chief for what he calls progress with Pyongyang.
The speed at which this diplomacy has moved is nothing short of remarkable, and it's largely due to one thing, and that's the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign and also putting the military option back on the table. And I'm hopeful this is real on the part of the North Koreans and the Chinese, and it's not just a delaying tactic to advance their technology, which is what they've always done.
But GOP Senator Lindsey Graham says he believes incoming National Security Advisor John Bolton has a different point of view.
This is why I like John Bolton as National Security Advisor. He has a very healthy skepticism of North Korea. His big fear is that they're just buying time. They're about 9 months to a year away of having a missile with a nuclear weapon on top that can hit America. He sees these negotiations as a way of buying time. That's what they've done in the past. So I'd cut them off at the pass there. I would make sure the negotiations were very focused and get quick action.
Well, at least we are negotiating. We are at the table. Does the president deserve credit for that? And is it a good thing that you have someone in that National Security Advisor role who's a bit more hawkish like John Bolton?
Well, putting aside Ambassador Bolton for a second, I think that it is impossible not to give the president props for this breakthrough. And I think it is a breakthrough. Moreover, I think very specifically, everybody can get this. The canary in the coal mine is Kim's response to the military exercises that he always vehemently opposed, threatening to go to war if South Korea and the United States had these joint military exercises. Even if you'll recall, firing on some South Korean islands and doing other very aggressive things to complain about the South Korean U.S. military exercises. So if Kim stays silent on that, I think that's a very good indicator that there will be meaningful negotiations. Now, do you trust them? Is he just using it to buy time so he secretly gets a trutonium bomb or some you know, exotic weapon? I don't know. I mean, if the past is any indicator, he probably will be sneaking around about it. But you never know. I mean, look at Nixon and China. Could be something great happening here, and the president deserves credit.
All right, so Trish, you're nodding here because now Kim Jong-un is taking a little bit more of a visual role. Normally, you know, they call it the Hermit Kingdom because he pretty much keeps to himself. But he went to South Korea, saw a little bit of, or rather, a South Korean K-pop band. There was a performance in North Korea. He took pictures with them. He obviously sent his sister to the Olympic Winter Games. He just visited China. Do you think that by appealing to his ego, the international community will get him to join the world stage and denuclearize?
Possibly. I think you're onto something with appealing to the ego here with him. He wants to be recognized as a player on the international world stage, and he needs nuclear weapons to do that. I think part of his problem is he's thinking, gosh, if I lose these things, am I no better off than Gaddafi when it comes to my potential fate? I mean, in other words, if you look historically at others who have engaged in this kind of behavior and then lost their weapons, it hasn't always been the great outcome. That said, I do think there's a window here. I hope to God there's a window here. I don't think our president is naive about any of this. I do think that Ambassador Bolton has to scare Kim Jong-un a little bit, because Ambassador Bolton is certainly very aggressive on this front.
You think?
You know, he and I have discussed this at length before, because I'm always, let's use our economic power, right? Let's have China put a lot of pressure on North Korea economically. And Ambassador Bolton is like, we're going straight to it. You know, he wants to see ships there nearby. I think it's got to be a little bit scary for them. And maybe that's perhaps what's going on. He can have a bigger presence on the world stage and do what's right.
Well, and right, because the key difference between where we are now and where we were under President Obama is Kim Jong-un doesn't know what President Trump is capable of. And I think President Trump has demonstrated that in his rhetoric with fire and fury, but also in his actions. Because remember what he did when he immediately took office? It was the 59 Tomahawk missiles to Syria. It was dropping the mother of all bombs on ISIS. And I think President Trump, right out the gate, wanted to demonstrate to the world and dictators like Kim Jong-un that I'm not messing around, and there's a different administration in town than with President Obama. And we know that that's had an effect, because Kim Jong-un, there's reports that he'd reached out to folks in Washington, D.C., trying to figure out, who is this guy? What is he capable of? Now, what does this end up meaning? And what do these negotiations, do they bear fruit or not? We don't really know that yet.
We haven't gotten there, but at least we're getting there.
Yeah, and I wonder in the end, how do you verify that anything has really taken place if they do talk about denuclearizing? We certainly got hosed in the Iran deal. They said, remember President Obama promising anytime, anywhere inspections. That was not the truth.
We've been hosed with North Korea. They promised the exact same thing, and then when we try and send atomic inspectors into the country,
so that's really
a vastly
the
different game.
Yeah.
All right, very good.
No more getting hosed.
Yeah, there's no hosiery. However, China now hitting back against the Trump administration, slapping tariffs on more than 100 U.S. imports in response to the president's tariffs on steel and aluminum. And are we seeing a drop in the Dow fairly early on in today's trading because of that? Could these moves by the world leaders lead to a trade war? Or does the president's move help protect American workers? We will debate and discuss. Plus, President Trump taking on California's Democratic Governor Jerry Brown. It's the latest salvo in the big battle over California's law protecting some illegal immigrants. Who will prevail in the sanctuary showdown? We'll get to it.
Fox News alert for you now. The Dow taking a hit today. One of the drivers of that is China hitting back at President Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum. The country slapping $3 billion of surcharges on more than 100 U.S. products, including pork, wine, and scrap metal. In an escalated dispute with Washington over trade, China's finance minister is saying, quote, the U.S. tariffs violated the relevant rules of the World Trade Organization and did not comply with the security exceptions provision, which actually constituted safeguard measures. This measure caused serious damage to our interests. China's advocacy and support for the multilateral trading system and the suspension of tariff concessions to the United States are legitimate measures taken by China. But the White House firing back, saying the president is done with America getting the raw end of the deal. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders.
The president knows that we're billions of dollars in a trade deficit with China. He's tired of us being taken advantage of. They've taken our intellectual property, and the president's going to fight back and he's going to push back. But we want to be able to work with them to make sure that we're getting a good deal and that we're not taken advantage of anymore. And that's exactly what people elected Donald Trump to come to Washington and do. Look, we've been doing the traditional way for a long time, and the only thing that has done is created a bigger trade deficit.
Geraldo, the market's down big, but I've talked to some Chinese experts who have said their response is actually muted compared to what they thought they would do, and that indicates that both sides are looking for a deal.
I agree, Melissa. I thought it was chump change. I mean, $3 billion sounds like a lot of money, but the 600 some odd billion dollars in trade and the deficits in the hundreds of millions, I just don't know why the market is reacting so emotionally. And I think part of the problem, I was talking at a commercial break, a buddy of mine, John Peters, big investor, worries about the president being too tempestuous, being too to, his ad libs not being structured enough, that maybe we should have warned China more before we imposed these tariffs. Maybe we could have taken a step before we hit Amazon so hard.
Yeah.
I worry that emotions affect real lives. I mean, when you have a 401k, or if you're about to retire and the market is down, when I see the Dow down triple digits like this, I say, oh,
but that's for people
another day I
retiring
have to work.
Today. I mean, it's up. The market is up and down. It's over the long term. I mean, Kennedy, what do you think?
No, we all know that. I think long term, the stock market is very solid. I think what the market is doing, I think it's more reactionary versus emotional. And I think there's worry that both the Axios piece about Amazon and, when you have terms like antitrust thrown around these behemoth organizations, how that could affect investors, in addition to a potential trade war. Those are two things that could undo all the gains gotten from the tax legislation that was passed and signed. Because the market loved that. The market loved the idea of, companies coming back to the United States, seeing a lower corporate tax rate rather, and individuals also seeing more in their paychecks, which boosts consumer confidence. All that adds to a healthy economy, but those two things certainly could be sidelined.
Trish, isn't this the art of the deal, though? I mean, they're in another room negotiating with Amazon over both the Postal Service, about a big government contract, about cloud computing. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on the scenes between the government and Amazon. He throws a Molotov cocktail out here in the open because someone's in a room and needs a bad guy. That's my theory. What do you think?
I think you're right. You get a little leverage this way. Let me walk you through some numbers. China, 65% tariff on wheat and rice imports that go from the U.S. into China. 0% is what we charge. China's 25% tariff on motor vehicle imports. We charge 2.5%. I mean, it goes on and on. 20% is what they charge on sugar imports. We charge nothing, vice versa. In other words, we have gotten the raw end of this deal. We absolutely have. It is time to renegotiate it. We should be renegotiating it. And if it takes throwing around the idea of a few tariffs that are going to cost them, by the way, a whole lot more money than they're going to cost us, then maybe that works. Maybe it is indeed the art of the deal.
It works if in the end we settle at a lower tariff rate. If at the end we settle at higher tariffs, then all consumers everywhere pay more. That's no good.
Well, and that's the gamble, right? But trade was such a key issue for President Trump in winning the Rust Belt, so I think it's important to keep that in mind when talking about this. But you're right, this is the art of the deal. President Trump is laying out these markers on tariffs to bring Mexico, Canada to the table on NAFTA, to bring China to the table. This response for them is muted. So hopefully it's a good sign that they're willing to talk, that they're willing to negotiate. But you're right. It's also a gamble, and we don't know where this is going to turn. We don't know what's going to happen to the stock market. We don't know how some of these other countries are going to react.
Can I tell you, though, the stock market needs to get over itself. Investors need to get over this, because here's the reality. We either deal with this now, or our kids are going to be dealing with it 10 years from now. And they're not going to have the same leverage, because China's going to be so much more powerful economically and in terms of its military. And so we either face this reality now.
They also own a lot of our debt. I mean, if you talk about future generations, we also have to cut spending in this country. The president and Congress have shown an inability to do that.
True.
And that's incredibly detrimental.
That's a big
Bernie
issue.
Sanders likes the tariffs.
Yes, he does. That should be a problematic sign right there.
In terms of the debt, too, we hold some cards there, because they need to get paid back.
Yeah, but
anyway,
we also don't want to default.
No,
I'm just not going to argue with
suggesting that, but
I'm not going to argue with the business folks in the council.
Anyway, we've got a new reaction amid the. We'll switch topics here. Growing showdown over California's sanctuary state law. Now the vice chair of the Orange County Board of Supervisors speaking out about the board's unanimous decision to join the Trump administration's lawsuit against the state. Watch.
We are put in an untenable position where our sheriff's deputies are precluded from talking to federal authorities if they know the authorities want to pick someone up because the person is here illegally, is charged with a crime, and our people can't even talk to the federal government unless there are some exceptions that are met, like they're a prior convicted felon. We've had 244 people as of last week released that we could not stop, and our people could not tell ICE officials that we believe ICE would have wanted to speak with and likely wanted to do something about.
All right, it all comes as the president takes aim at California Governor Jerry Brown. He did so over the weekend for pardoning some criminals slated for deportation. Here he is saying, Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown pardoned 5 criminal illegal aliens whose crimes include 1, kidnapping and robbery, 2, badly beating wife and threatening a crime with intent to terrorize, 3, dealing drugs. Is this really what the great people of California want? Governor Brown has issued more pardons than the last 5 California governors combined. But the governor's office using the president's own words to defend the pardons, tweeting, quote, "This month we celebrate those who have exited the prison system and successfully re-entered society. We encourage expanded opportunities and emphasize our belief in second chances for those who are able to turn their lives around." Geraldo, I keep looking at this issue and I don't understand how this even should be an issue. If we are a country, this is one where federal law, and Candy knows well, I'm all about state law and I like states to have rights, but this is one where this seems the federal law should totally trump, no pun intended, what's going on in the states. I mean, you have to control who's in your country.
I agree that every country needs borders, as we started the program saying. But I've known Moonbeam Brown for as long as I've known Trump. I've known him since he was sleeping on the mattress on the floor, not eschewing the mansion in Sacramento, living with Linda Ronstadt.
That is so
and I also think that he'd be the most potent Democratic candidate against President Trump in 2020. He makes sense of on the liberal and the progressive side. The whole idea of sanctuary, you mentioned that, federal law should trump state law in terms of immigration. And it does, broad strokes, and that was decided against Arizona. But this issue has to be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States. They have to lay out what the federal government responsibility is, what the state government responsibility is. It has to be one size fits all in terms of state-federal relations. Sanctuary, very controversial, but there are definitely people who hold impassioned views on both sides.
But for Governor Brown, this may help him in a state like California, where California is essentially ground zero for the resistance. And clearly illegal immigration is where they're sort of staking their ground, the resistance. But I don't think it helps him nationally, because especially you look coming up at those midterm elections, if President Trump makes immigration a larger national issue, which he is heading into 2018, I don't think that helps him in some of these red states where Democrats are seeking re-election, Missouri, North Dakota, Ohio, where these individuals in the state went Trump heavy and they want to see these policies that President Trump talked about on the campaign trail enacted. So I don't think it necessarily helps Democrats in the broader scheme of things. In California, it's more irrelevant.
Kennedy, what do you think of that?
I think it's interesting, the idea of taking the campaign promises that you've made on the trail and enacting them when you're president, because we never see that. I mean, look at President Obama.
What a concept.
Isn't that sad? No, I mean, but it's like he laid out, love him or hate him, he laid out exactly what he wanted to do, and he's trying to figure out a way. Sometimes it's impulsively, sometimes it's counterproductive when you talk about Twitter and social media. But he said this is exactly what he said he was going to do. President Obama said he was going to close Guantanamo Bay. He ran in 2008 as a civil libertarian and grossly expanded the surveillance state in this country. I think there is a massive disconnect between the states and the federal government. I think, it's not just about the Supreme Court. Congress has to take a stand and say, we are the ones who craft laws. This is our immigration policy. They absolutely have to do it. It is morally incumbent upon them.
Congress is the most dysfunctional body on earth. They will not craft anything.
Melissa, it gets back to politics, right? It's all politics for so many.
It's all politics. I just know we can't have open borders and a generous social welfare system.
Not a chance.
These things
Absolutely
don't
right.
work together because we will go bankrupt.
But this will be
And
the
entitlement
issue
state.
of the midterms.
Taxation
that you're
is
absolutely right about.
Well, there might be a lot of Democrats that don't win.
There might be.
Anyway,
there might be.
President Trump appears to have decided that he's going to be one of the ones calling his own shots there in the White House for now. A new report says he's filling his staff with loyalists who embrace his personal style in the hopes of getting more things done. Is this a good strategy? Or could it backfire? We're going to debate it. We'll see you here right after this.
President Trump calling his own shots when it comes to leading the country. The Washington Post reporting the commander-in-chief is returning to his personal style, ditching White House stabilizers that are seeking to restrain him. For figures who embrace his impetuous nature, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying, quote, The president is in an action mood and doesn't want to slow roll things from trade to the border to staffing changes. He wants to make things that he's been discussing for a while happen. He's tired of the wait game. So, Geraldo, you said that President Trump is better off going alone. Why?
I agree. I mean, I agree with myself. During the Steve Bannon days, the West Wing is a nest of vipers and rats and snakes. He talks to Putin and congratulates Putin. It gets leaked to the Washington Post in 15 minutes. He's better off taking his own counsel. He is impetuous in his speech. Sometimes he is not impetuous in his actions. If you look at what he's done as president so far, it's been a traditional conservative approach to life. It's much more measured than he's given credit for. Everything he says or does is construed in the most evil way possible. I say good on him. Nixon opened China. It wasn't, it wasn't Jimmy Carter.
But Kennedy, aren't there limitations in going it alone for some of these big ticket items like infrastructure? Doesn't he need Congress?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we criticized President Obama for, was his overuse of executive order and executive action. You do need Congress. They don't do much. They're terrified. Legislating through fear is absolutely no way to govern. And I understand it's a difficult role, but that's why people want to be president. It's also the most powerful position in the country. And there's not enough time in the day to do everything by yourself.
One quote I heard that really rung true was that he was tired of people coming into his office and telling him why what he wanted couldn't be done. It was the wrong thing to want. And he's like, forget it. If you look at the people that he's hired from Larry Kudlow on down, these are people, it's not a hard turn to the right. It's not hard right, it's hardcore. They're people who believe very deeply in their own opinions and what their research and what they've done, and they feel confident about the path forward. And they're not yes men. They're going to go in there and tell him, what they really believe, but they have a lot of energy and are action oriented. I think that's what he's been missing, is he hates the inaction.
Which is so typical of D.C., right? I mean, Larry and Melissa and I know him very well. He doesn't like tariffs. No. And he'll make that very clear. But again, Larry's his own guy. The president is his own guy. I think part of what he would like to see is perhaps a little more loyalty from the team around him, right, Geraldo? Because, I mean, if you're having a phone call with Putin and 15 minutes later the Washington Post is writing about it, then maybe you don't want everyone in your office knowing, or maybe you need to change your office and the people you have there working for you. And
you also have a situation where everybody's making a big fuss over the fact that he played golf with Sean Hannity this weekend. And Sean, of course, is a hard right conservative. He had dinner with me last month, and I'm certainly not a conservative of any stripe. So he listens to different points of view, but then he gathers the data and makes his own call.
But you worry, I mean, some of these folks that need confirmation, there's a backlog here. You look at CIA director, Secretary of State, now VA secretary. So does any of this lead to instability?
The president has expressed to me, how do you feel? You sit down and, all right, what are you talking about today? Monrovia. All right, here's a 3-page, single-spaced brief on Monrovia. The president looks at this, he says, I get it. What is it in 3 sentences? What's the issue? The dictator of the second party is doing the thing and they're screwing around with this. Okay, I got it. He doesn't have the contemplative nature of Barack Obama, but he has his own way of doing business, and he's been pretty successful.
All right. Well, some big news from our #OneLuckyGuy, this guy right here, Geraldo Rivera. His new book, titled The Geraldo Show, a memoir, hits shelves tomorrow. We're going to get the inside scoop from the man himself. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
So big news for our very own Geraldo Rivera. His new book, The Geraldo Show, a memoir, hits shelves tomorrow. The autobiography details his extraordinary life, including 48 exciting years in the news business. Geraldo's here to tell us about all of it. So I am one of those people who snuck out of bed to watch The Vault. I have
nice of you to
personally
bring it up.
watched you forever. But Geraldo, I've heard you talk about that before, and you are such an inspiration to me, because there have been so many times in your career when you've remade your career and you've taken what looked like a thumping and you've turned it into a golden opportunity. Your story is really, really inspirational. I've thought that for a long time. I'm glad to be here and have the opportunity to say that. But you're so honest. And I read excerpts from the book, and you're self-deprecating. It's really fantastic.
The vault specifically is such a seminal chapter in my life because I had just been fired from ABC News because I complained about a story being spiked, a story about the Kennedy family and their alleged relationship with Marilyn Monroe and so forth. But I got fired, and someone offered me the job to open this gangster's vault in Chicago. I took the job. There was nothing in the vault. I knew everybody was watching in the whole world. It was highest rated syndicated show in history. I'm sure, and it was empty, except in the vault was ratings and 22 job offers, and it meant so much for the whole rest of my life. But recovering from that was quite a.
But what a great message!
Yes.
And that shows people, like, don't be afraid of something that you would have perceived as failure.
Aside from that, and aside from telling the story of America's arc and how it affected me personally, from 9/11 to the death of bin Laden by SEAL Team 6, 10 years, I tell that story. The message of the book is really one of conciliation. Look at, you all know Erica, my wife. She hates President Trump. I mean, hate is a strong word, but disagrees with all his policies. I, on the other hand, disagree with many of his policies, but I love the man who's been my dear and loyal friend for over 40 years now. That division that Roseanne talked about in her show last week, how families are divided by the presidency, by the 45th president of the United States, how I see my role as the conciliator, the middle of the road, the compromiser. I want to bring the sides together.
And also the interpreter.
And the interpreter in many ways, my impetuous friend.
Geraldo, have you ever seen it like this in your 48 years?
Yeah, Roger Ailes, our late boss, used to say that the only thing in the middle of the road, Trish, is roadkill. I want to prove that that's not true. I want to prove that you can be in the middle of the road. You can listen to both sides and make an informed compromise.
Here we go. More Outnumbered.
But I hope
we'll
you
be right
enjoy it.
back.